sometimes things happen and you're not at school. And what can you do to help you remember what you're going to write about until you get to school the next day?
Remember. You could change, like if you have a ring on this hand, you could change it to the other hand.
Oh, that's a great idea. There's a big word for that. It's called a mnemonic device. And boy, you know, I forgot how smart you guys are. You can do something that's going to help you remember. And then when you look at your hand, just say, oh yeah, I did that to remind myself that I wanted to write about well, whatever the interesting thing was. Maybe it was going to a dance class. What else can you do to help you remember?
Well, you can write it down on a piece of paper.
That's right, and lots of kids who are writers always carry something to write their notes down on, and I do too. I always have this book with me. I just never know when I'm going to get an idea, and when I do, then I just take out my pen and I write it down. Now you can see in this little thing, these are my ideas. I did a lot of ideas, and I've got a couple pages left, and usually one of these will last me maybe 2 weeks, but if I have a really good week with lots of ideas, it might even only last me 1 day. And lots of kids I know have little notebooks with them that they just jot down an idea when they get a good idea. But let's say you didn't have pen or paper with you, and let's say it's tonight, and you're not going to be at school to write about it until tomorrow morning. What else could you do to help you
remember? You could maybe get like what Megan said, or whoever, switch it on the switch.
You know, one of the things I always do when I come to classrooms is I notice who's the good listeners, and I just want to compliment the people who are sitting with their little breakfast and really listening, because that's one of the things that I always study is kids who are very good listeners. And look at, we've got 4 people in this room who are wonderful listeners, and we've got so many very good listeners here.
You could write it on your hand.
Well, you could do that. All right. You could write it on paper. You could change something on your hand to remember, or you could say it to yourself. You could say it to yourself over and over again, or you could say your idea to somebody else, like your mom or dad or sister or brother. But the important thing is you have to do something so that when you come to school in the morning and you walk through that door, you know what you're going to write about. Is it your teacher's job to decide what you're going to write about?
No.
Is it your parents' job to decide what you're going to write about? Should your parents, before you leave, say to you, what are you going to write about?
Yeah.
Well, they could help, but what would be better than having your mom say, what are you going to write about? What would be even better than that?
You just think about it yourself and you try to remember it.
And you could say to your mom, Mom, you know what I'm going to write about today? I'm going to write about that really interesting day we had at the beach. And you know, sometimes when you're writing books that are going to be published, it should take you 2 or 3 days to write that very, very interesting piece. Well, today we're going to do Writer's Workshop, and I'm very excited because last year when we did Writer's Workshop, we spent practically our whole time just sounding out words. I don't know if you remember. I really remember.
I do.
But this year, you're a whole year older, and I cannot wait to see the writing you're doing and the ideas you've got. And so to do this, we're going to do several things. Now, here's the first thing we're going to do. In a minute, not yet, when you go back to your seats, we're going to have paper, and I'm going to say, and you can't write anything till I say go. But when I say go, I'm going to write 5 ideas on the board, and I think I can write my 5 ideas faster than you can write your own 5 ideas on your paper. So what you should be doing right now is thinking about 5 interesting things you're interested in that you could write out. But you can't start writing it until I'm ready and I say go. I have to tell you, I'm very good at this because I go into lots of classrooms, and there has never been a class that's beat me. I always beat the kids when it comes to writing ideas fast. So if you can think of your ideas, and you just write 1 word for each idea, so you know what your ideas are. If you can do it faster than me, it will be the first time anyone has ever beaten me.
Yeah, how do you know when we get a prize?
Well, I'll know because I'll be writing them on the board. And when I look up, if kids are done and they're sitting there very quietly and their pencils are done and they have their 5 ideas, I'll know I was beat. But that's never happened, so I'm not worried. I have a feeling I'm going to beat you. All right, so here's what we're going to do in a minute. We're going to go back to your desk and you'll get your paper and pencil. But can you start writing? No, not until I say.
Go.
Okay, is there a way we go back to our desk? Do we go by tables?
We could go by tables. I have one question. Kelsey, could you listen? Do you want them to do it right in their journal, or would you like them to have a separate piece of?
That's up to you. How would you like it?
It would be nice to have it right in their journal.
I have a question. Can you, like, do you have to write something, or can you, like, write words?
No, you have to have 5 words that represent 5 ideas. So, I mean, we heard a lot of them already. You might write down your dog's name for one of them. You might write down your dad coming home, you know, just dad for another one. But remember, you're trying to write 5 things faster than me.
I have a question.
All right, I will take 2 questions.
Do you have to write what your idea was that you put on the
Just one word. Just one word. That's all we're going to do right now. And you know what? I think I'm not going to even take any more questions because I'll explain the next thing we're going to do after we do that.
What ideas so that you have to write?
But start writing. Now, does everyone have their journal yet? No. Still.
Really go home and oh, yeah. How's that? I need that part in my
Don't
first
write
week.
your ideas. Just the date.
We have on already.
Get set. And go.
Oops, I messed up. You beat me. Oh, what would I do? She didn't beat me. Oh no. What's it? It's my dog. My horse. Done. She won you. I won.
Now remember, I'll know if people are done because their pencils are done and they're sitting quietly. I cannot believe that.
She lost. Just leave Peter. That's not 3 words. It's 3
And to look up, because I'm going to do some talking, and so I need you to be really good listeners. Remember how I said I'm always watching kids to see which kids are really the great listeners?
No.
Now, in a minute, we're going to be talking about our ideas. Here's my ideas. I wrote 1 Ellie, 2 Ruby, 3 Emily, 4 Sasha, 5 Great Grandma. Now, even though I have these 5 ideas, do you know what I'm going to write about each one of them? No, that's why talking about it is so important. Because the first thing I'm going to write about is Ellie. And Ellie is my stand up.
Dog.
Stand up.
Dalmatian.
This is why Sasha has this shirt. I bought him this shirt because this looks just like Ellie. This was perfect for you to wear it today. And Ellie is a horrible dog. The worst dog you have ever seen in the world.
Did she pee on the carpet?
What Ellie does is she eats everything in sight. So when she was 4 months old, she was throwing up so much we had to take her to the vet and she had to stop operation. And what they did is they opened her stomach and they found tiny pebbles in the stomach. And what we found out about these tiny pebbles was that Ellie was eating the cat litter. But I don't have to talk about when she was 4 months old because she's 5 years old now. And last week, for Halloween, I bought Sasha some candy, some little candy with foil on it to send to him so he would have a little Halloween treat from his aunt. And do you know what that Ellie did? She ate all the candy with the foil and everything. I couldn't believe it. And she does that all the time. She is just an obnoxious dog. But I don't have just one terrible dog. I have 2 terrible dogs. Ruby is my other dog, and Ruby is a tiny miniature dachshund, and she has long brown hair. Those fits like the hot dog does, and she fits in my hands just like this. And she thinks she can boss Ellie around, and she does. So I have a big dish of food for Ellie and a little dish of food for Ruby. Do you think Ruby wants to eat out of her dish?
No.
She eats out of Ellie's. And Ellie, does Ellie do anything about it?
No.
No, Ellie stands there and barks like a tattletale so that I will come and move this huge, tiny little dog out of the way so that the big, ferocious dog can eat the food. And if Ellie wants to go to the toilet to get a drink of water, even though I have water out there, Ruby goes with too, and Ruby just jumps in the toilet, and she gets soaking wet, and she gets the water. Or I have gates in my kitchen to keep the dog in. If Ellie decides to jump over the gate, so does Ruby. She just goes on top of the kitchen table, she takes a flying start, and she flies over the table. Well, the third thing I have here is Emma, and Emma's my cat. And I used to have the best cat in the world, Kitty. She was so sweet. She liked to sit on my lap. Now I've got a cat who doesn't even want to be around us. In fact, she thinks she's a dog. When the dogs go outside and they have the little leashes they go out on, so Emma goes to the door and she cries so she can go out too. And everything the dogs do, she wants to do. Now the fourth thing I wrote about is Sasha. And the reason I put Sasha on is because usually when I go on things and I talk, I usually do talk about Sasha. So I thought that would be fun for me to tell you what I'm talking about. And Sasha has, of course, so many interesting things in his life that I never know what I'm going to be talking about with Sasha. But I think probably if I was in anybody else's classroom, I'd be talking about your soccer season because I've heard a lot of stuff is going on with the soccer and that the soccer team is doing a real good job. And the last thing I have is Grandma. This is Sasha's great grandma, and I have her on there because I've been worried about her. For a long time she lived in Los Angeles, but she just moved to San Antonio a few months ago. And I'm just really worried that she's going to miss her old home. And I just feel like we need to make sure to visit her, and I'm calling her a lot. And so she's on my mind, and I think this would be a important thing for me to talk about. Well, now that I've talked about each of my things, do you know more about what I'm going to write about? Yeah, you know a lot more. And just in the same way, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to talk to us first today. Should we work with maybe the person sitting next to us?
Get up and do it.
Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, just like I did, in your very softest voices, talk about your 5 things with a star by what you want to write first. Okay, and now I want you to stop. And if you haven't put a star by what you want to write about first, make sure you put a star by it now so you know what you're going to write about. And then I want you to put your pencils down, because I'm going to talk about how we're going to do the writing workshop, and it might be a little older, and you're such big writers now. So, you ready? Put pencils down, because you have to know the rules. Here's the rules of writing workshop. From the minute I say go to the minute I say stop, everybody has to write. And you have to keep writing. Does that mean you can get up and sharpen your pencil?
No.
No. Does that mean you can get up and get another piece of paper?
No.
No. Does that mean you can get up and get Kleenex?
Yes.
No. You have to stay at your seat and write. Does that mean you can talk to the person who's sitting next to you?
No.
Okay. From the minute I say go to the minute I say stop, everybody has to write. Well, what if you don't know how to spell a word? What do?
Raise your hand.
Okay, today I'm going to change it a little differently. Today, don't raise your hand, because the rule is everybody has to write. you have to keep writing. So if you can't raise your hand, what do you do if you don't know how to spell a word?
Sound it out.
Sound it out.
Or ask your neighbor.
Okay, but today I'm asking you not to ask your neighbor. Today I'm asking you to sound it out. In fact, we want to see how you sound it out the best you can. What do you do if you get stuck and you don't know what to write next? Can you just sit there and think?
No.
No, because you have to keep writing.
Because
So what do you do?
Because another idea.
You get another idea. Okay. What do you do if you finish your book? Let's say you finish your whole story. What do you do?
You probably could get up and get another one.
Well,
You
write another story. Exactly. That's why you've got this list with all these ideas. If you finish one thing and I haven't said stop yet, then you go to another idea. Okay? So does everybody get this?
Yes.
From the minute I say start to the minute I say stop, everybody has to write. Can you talk to anybody during this?
No.
Now, here's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be watching to see what kind of job you do. And I probably will come and talk to you about your writing a little bit. But if you see me go over there and write, you will know that this is a perfect writing workshop. Because everybody is writing, and nobody's talking, and everybody's following all the rules. Now, a lot of times when I'm in classrooms, kids can't do it, and I never get over there. So out of the corner of your eye, if you see me sit down, then you know it's a wonderful writing workshop.
Do we write all the other ideas?
Do we write? Yeah.
Yeah, just go right on like this.
You're just going to keep writing on your paper.
That's what I mean, just go on to the next page, if you took up your whole page using
All
your
right,
line
one
things.
more time. From the minute I say go to the minute I say stop, you're going to write. Are you going to talk?
No.
No. Are you going to sit with your hand in the air?
No.
You're going to sound it out the best you can. All right, get ready, get set, and oh, I forgot the other rule too. Don't erase. If you make a mistake, just keep going. Okay? So what can you remember what you wrote so far?
I don't know.
What does it say? And okay, and what are you going to write about your dad? What could you write about your dad? Well, you know, a writer can never say I don't know. You have to think of something. So you have to think of one thing to write about your dad. What's something you could write about your dad? Does your dad play games with you?
No.
Okay, then write, my dad doesn't play games with me. Go ahead and write it right now. Well, you have to. If you can't think of something, then you have to write what I tell you. Those are your choices. Did you think of something to write? All right, then write my. Sound it out. My. What sound is that? What makes Good. Okay, put the N. Good. My. I. Good. Okay. My dad. Okay. Doesn't. Don't. Does. Good. My dad doesn't play. Good. How did you know that was the right letter? How did you know it was an A?
I don't know.
Very good. Things. With. Good. Me. And what do you always put in the sentence?
Baby.
Perfect. Great. You are good at signing out. Can you read this one?
My dad doesn't play it.
And what you might want to do now is draw a picture to go with that. Goes on like this much longer and then have to sit down and write too. This is one of the best writing workshops I have ever seen. Excellent job. Isn't that a dangerous job, though? What do kids volunteer? Good writers you are. Everybody followed the rules. And people were writing, and they kept writing. They sounded out words by themselves. And during the writing time, they stayed writing. Excellent, excellent job. Now listen carefully to what we're going to do next. In a minute, we're going to go back to the rug, and we're going to bring our dogs with us. But to do that, I want you to leave your pencils at your desk. And when you come over, I want you to put your journal down on the floor in front of you, so you're not touching. Your journal is down on the floor, and then you're sitting behind it or next to it. Yeah, that was great.
Okay, let's have the baseball ones. Excuse me, happy holidays.
Okay, please fold your legs up so there's enough room for your journal and for the kids who just came, we have another row up here. There's room for another row up here. Not touching the journals at all. very, very important part of writing is having conferences. And having conferences is so important because it's important to think about your writing while you're talking about your writing. And one of the things that you'll be able to do this year is to have conferences when you know how to do them. So today, and I'm going to ask you to put your paper down. Today, we're going to practice having conferences. Now, one of the things I find is that doing a conference is kind of hard for kids, but you did so good at everything that we've done today. I give up. You're just doing such a wonderful job that I bet you're going to surprise me again.
We can do one, right?
Yeah, you are. I can always tell when I'm in a room full of writers because they show me in so many ways. But this part is hard, and you know, I teach teachers. And last night in Chicago, I had a class of teachers, and we were doing this exact thing. We were trying to conference, and the teachers had a terrible time because this is hard. So it'll be very interesting to see if you can do it. Okay, now let's say you're the author and you're writing your story and you want to have a conference. You can have a conference for any reason. A lot of times after you write a page, it's good just to read it to a friend and get some more ideas about it. Or you might want your friend to help you. So if you're the author, you've written your page, what you would do is you would say to somebody, do you want to have a conference with me? And let's say maybe Mrs. Gaynor makes that table over there, the conference center. Then you would both go over there and you would have the conference. But here's the thing about a conference. If you have a conference, it's very short. You go, you read your story. Now, if your story is longer than a page, you only read the last page. So when you write the first page, you go and have a conference. And then the next time you have a conference, you would say, well, here's what my story's about. It's about my dog, Ellie, and Ruby always trying to boss Ellie around. And then you would just read that last page. Okay, so this is one thing to keep in mind while we practice it. Okay, got that? It's short. Now, after your questioner asks you one or two questions, then both people go back to their desk and start writing. A conference always with both people writing. So that's another thing that we're going to be looking for to do. And it's also hard to know when to end a conference, so you want to make sure after one or two good questions that you do it. Now, if somebody asks you a question and you get a good idea, and let's say you're thinking, is it okay to think at a conference? Yes, it's very important to think in a conference. Okay? So if somebody comes up here and is very, very quiet, is that a good conference?
Yeah.
Yes. That shows. Do we want just the first answer that comes to your mind? No, we want the best answer you can think of. So if we see a kid come up here and they're really thinking, then, and it's quiet, we know that that's a sign of a good conference. All right? Now, if you're the author and somebody asks you a question, you can't say, I don't know. If you have a conference, you have to think of the answer, even if you don't know it. And if you're writing a factual story, then later on you go and look up the facts. But you can't say, I don't know. You've got to think of it. And when a conference is, after you get one or two questions, you have to say, I've got enough to about, and then both of you go back and write. Now, if you're the questioner, you have 3 jobs. One is like a cheerleader for the writer. That means if the author reads you their story, can you say, I hate it, it's really terrible? No. No, you're there to have them want to keep writing. So you want to be very, very good. Okay? You want to say something good. And if there's a part you really like, what you do is you say, oh, I like the part where you talked about Ruby jumping into the toilet. And then I know, oh, I should keep that part in. But here's the hardest part. Okay? If you're the questioner, you have to ask 1 or 2 questions that really follow the story. Not just any question in the whole world, but it's a question that you really have about the story that helps the author think about the story. And it can't be a yes or no question. It has to be a question that's going to make the author do more time. And that's what was so hard that the teachers last night had such a hard time doing. So we're going to all practice one together with me, and then we're going to practice and see how you guys do. And my story is about my 2 dogs, Ellie and Ruby. Now, going to tell part of my story, and then you're going to have a conference with me, okay? You're going to ask the questions. Well, upstairs where I sleep, I have this big bed, okay? And at the foot of the bed, I have this big blanket, and that's Ellie's bed. And at the side of the bed, I have this little blanket, and that's Ruby's bed. Now, this is a true story, I'm ashamed to say. But a couple months ago, Ruby didn't want to sleep on her bed. So she went and she slept on Ellie's bed. Now, do you think Ellie would sleep on her bed if Ruby was on her bed?
No.
No. So Ellie went on top of my bed, which she is not allowed to do. But it was like really late at night. I was up real late, and I just was too tired to do anything. And Ellie falls asleep, and she's the funny dog, because she makes these noises, like she'll go, and like she's always talking to you. And sometimes she has nightmares, and she started to have a nightmare, and she was shaking and shivering, and she's going, all right, now that's as much of the story as I've written. You need to ask me good questions that move the story forward. Like, what did Ellie do when she had the nightmare?
What did I do?
Such a good question. Well, and it's a perfect question. Can I say yes or no to that?
No.
If I answer, are you going to find out more about this story?
No.
Well, Ellie started going, she was going, and then she rolled right off the bed. That was a wonderful question. Yes, it's a question.
Well, at least she got off the bed. That's a comment. Did she fall on the side or did she fall on the foot?
All right, that is such a great idea. Now it's a yes or no question, so we've got to rephrase it to get me to do more of the talking. And we might say, where did she fall? That is such a good question because that's what the story is all about. She fell right off of the bed and on top of
Ruby. Did Ruby walk?
All right, and another very good question, but I can say yes or no. So is there another way you can say that so I can tell you what Ruby did? What did
Ruby do?
Oh, you guys are better at this than the teachers were last night. Oh, are you good writers? Ruby started screaming. And such a screaming way. She was crying and screaming and my heart was so frozen it just stopped. Well, Ruby's only 7 pounds and Ellie is 70 pounds. A 70-pound dog fell on a 7-pound dog.
Oh.
Now, who has another good question for me?
Did the dog get killed?
All right, now, this is another good question. But again, I can say
Was
yes
he
or no.
almost killed?
What you want to do is get me to talk about what happened to the dog, right?
Was he almost killed?
How you want to say this is what happened to the dog. Well, of course, I was worried that maybe she was. I was so scared. So I tried to pick her up, and she was crying. But finally she let me pick her up. By this time, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't know what to do.
Didn't she break her legs?
Well, now, instead of saying something that would be a yes or no thing, what we would do is we would change it to, well, what happened to her? That's the big question here. Well, the next morning I went to the vet, and they did x-rays, and the pelvic bone, your pelvic bone, her pelvic bone was broken in 2 places.
Oh, that must have hurt. What happened to her after that?
Look at that question. Can I say yes or no to it?
No.
No. Excellent question. Well, the vet told me that I had to keep her still for 3 months. She couldn't move.
Oh.
Well, that wasn't very hard that first day. I brought her home and she was in so much pain. And Emma the cat came and kissed her on the face. And Ellie felt so bad, she cuddled up right next to Ruby. But after about 5 days, she was running around the house and she wanted to go out for walks. And when I would take Ellie for a walk, she would lay by the door crying the whole time we were gone. So she didn't stay still very long. Now there's one more question that's important here, and that's the question about me. How did I feel about this?
How did you feel?
I felt so guilty, like I was a very, very bad pet owner. How could I have let that happen? I felt so guilty that when I went to work, I called on the phone box and I said, Ruby, Ruby, are you okay, Ruby? This is me. Are you feeling better?
How could Ruby pick up the phone?
Well, see, if you talk on the phone box, it's right by where her little home is when I'm not home. So I knew she could hear me. Well, you did an excellent job with the conference, and I would say I don't need any more questions. In fact, I only needed 2. I've got enough to write about it, and I would have to go write it. Now, just like we did it here, in a second, we're going to choose one person to come sit in the author's chair, and we're going to have you ask 1 or 2 good questions, and then we're going to see them go. Now, you don't have to, if you have more questions, that's okay. That's why you have a conference later, another time. You just have a few ones. All right, so who has a story they want to come up and sit in the author's chair and read? And let me say, if I've called on you already, put your hands down so I can call on somebody who hasn't had a turn yet. Now, all of you are the listeners and the questioners, and you're going to ask 1 or 2 good questions. Now, he's going to read it as loud as he can so we can all hear, and you're going to be listening to him with your good questions.
I am in soccer. I am a halfback, and I have made a goal. It
Is fun.
fun. It involves sometimes I am what?
Okay, sometimes I am a fullback. Okay, we're going to call on for your questions. Now, if he sits here and thinks for a while, is that okay?
Yeah.
But can you say I don't know?
No.
No, if you're the author, you have to think of an answer. So we're going to watch a real conference happen now while he thinks of his answer. Is it okay for it to be quiet?
Yeah.
It's a good conference if you're thinking.
I feel good.
Now, let's start. When somebody answers you, are you satisfied with that, or do you want to know more? If you want to know more, then you can ask another question. And my question would be, why do you feel good? Is this okay for him to think?
Yeah. It's a good conference.
Let me tell you one thing. When somebody's thinking, if somebody else talks, it stops your thinking. So you have to really have absolute quiet while the person's thinking so that they don't stop thinking.
Now I forget your question.
Why do you feel good when you're a halfback? What's one thing that makes you feel good about it?
I can block the goal. Just like the goal sometimes.
Wow. Now, just think of that. He had just 2 questions, but now he can write that I feel good when I'm the halfback, because you can block the goals like the goalie sometimes. Does he need any more questions?
No.
So he says, I've got enough to write about, and go right at your desk and write that in. Let's try one more person, and only raise your hand if you haven't gotten a chance to talk yet. So everybody who wants to gets a chance. Which is the one you wrote today? Okay. Real loud.
Trail because I saw cannons and swords and knives and bugs. It doesn't make sense. Sash. What are bugs? We should just cut out the bugs. They're things that horses pull.
Okay, stop and put your hands down. Was this a good question?
Yeah.
Yes. We didn't know what buggies were. That's why you have a conference. You don't know what people don't understand. Now, do you have something you can into your story? Yeah. So do you need another question?
No.
No. So how do you end the conference? What do you say?
Okay.
I've got enough to write about, and you go right back to your desk and you put that in. You write what a buggy is. Now listen carefully, hands down. What we're going to do now is I want everybody to have a chance to try and be the author and to try and be the questioner. So when you're the author, you read your piece, and when you're the questioner, you ask a good question. Because we've got 4 grown-ups in the room, we're going to try and listen to you. So what we'll do is we'll probably have a 4 maybe, so we can hear them do that. And when we're done, each of us grown-ups are going to say something that we noticed about each conference that they did well.